Hello everyone, welcome to AWS Data Engineering classes. Yesterday we talked about IAM, that was Identity and Access Management. That was more about permissions, users, roles, policies and all. Today we are talking about our next topic, that is S3. S3 stands for Simple Storage Solution. On very high level, it's more about storage. How storage is managed from AWS side, what are the permissions required, what are different techniques to manage that, and everything we will be looking practically from our trial account. So let's start the class with the agenda. So the agenda for this class is overview of S3 service, create a bucket, data security and encryption, upload objects into bucket, data versioning, and S3 storage classes. So if time will allow, we will go to the advanced part as well. We are starting with the basic of S3 and we'll see if we can cover the advanced stuff as well. Okay. So I will go to directly to my trial account and we'll do it there. So I will log in into my okay NB7 and since we have configured our MFA yesterday, it will be asking for that code and let me pick it from my phone. 756504. Okay, so we have successfully logged in into our AWS console and we'll be searching for S3. Let's open that. Okay, so we have opened the S3 console and we'll talk about how to create a bucket. That's the first thing we'll do. So click on create bucket, and there are a lot of configuration actually. So I will keep on explaining about each and everything because it's very important to understand those things. Creating a bucket is hardly few seconds activity. I can just provide a name and click on create, but we'll not do that. We'll talk about different aspect of creating bucket. What are the different options like versioning, security, and encryption? What does it mean, and why do we need that? We'll talk about all these things. So the very first thing is bucket type. So this general purpose bucket, you can read this out if you want. Recommended for most use cases and access pattern. General purpose bucket are original S3 buckets type. This is the, I mean, from the beginning, this is the bucket type. Directory is something new, which is recommended for low latency use case. These buckets are only the S3 Express 1 John storage classes. This is different actually. So 99% of the cases you have to go with general purpose S3 buckets. So we'll go with this and then provide a meaningful bucket name. Meaningful in the sense, like, first of all, it's a global, unique. So if you provide any random name that may be already existing, you can see here bucket name must be unique within the global namespace. So what we will do is, let's try something. I would say my first S3 bucket needed. Okay. Let's see if that is unique. If not unique, we'll add some random number. So scroll down and let's talk about the next thing, object ownership. There are two type of ownership thing is here. One thing is that you are the owner of the bucket. That is owner of the bucket. After that, who is the owner of the objects inside that? So there are two ways. Either as a bucket owner, you will be the owner of all the objects inside that. Or sometime you may give the flexibility to other teams that they can copy the data or they can create new objects into the bucket and they will be the owner. The benefit of giving them the ownership is so that they can create the objects and if required they can even delete that. That's the purpose, but it all depends upon the use case. If you allow people only to copy the data and you don't want to give them ownership, that's absolutely fine. In that case they won't be able to delete the data. But in case multiple teams are working in the same bucket and you are maintaining your data in different folders, in that case you want to give them the full flexibility that they can copy or they can create new objects inside their folder, and if required they can even delete that. So that's also possible. Okay, so this first option is recommended, ACL disabled. ACL stand for access control list. So we go with the recommended settings and come down to the next setting. Next is block public access setting for this bucket. By default it's blocked. That means whatever data you will put inside the bucket, suppose you're putting a text file or you're putting a image or audio or video, that will not be accessible outside of your account. I mean, whoever is having access to AWS account, that's a different thing, but for normal public it won't be accessible. Because why? Because we are blocking all the public access. You may be thinking, if we unblock it, then if we unblock it, then definitely it can made accessible to other people. That usually happens when you want to, suppose there is a I would say some product, you are selling some products and there are a lot of pictures over there, right? So you are maintaining those catalog in S3, and it's a public things, like you want to simply share that link of S3 bucket with your clients. There is no security required. You want people to view that catalog. In that case we can unblock these settings, and I will show you the real scenario as well, like when exactly we need to unblock it. But for now, when you're creating a bucket, by default the public access is, I can say, disabled, and that's a good thing. Okay, so you can stop me at any point of time. If you have any doubt on any of the setting, you can stop me. So before I move to the next one, I will take a pause. Feel free to ask if you have any doubt. Okay, seems like there is no doubt. So moving to the next one. Next is bucket versioning. Bucket versioning is basically, if you are copying a file into S3 bucket, it will hold your data. And tomorrow, if you are uploading a newer version of the file, what it will do? It will replace the file, right? Older version will go and newer version will come. By default, it will behave like that. But if your requirement is that you want to keep the older data as well, if you want to keep the older version of the file along with the newer version, you can enable the bucket versioning. So let me enable that. I'm enabling it. That means you can keep on updating the newer version of the file, and behind the scene it will maintain all the versions. Along with the latest version, older version will also be available. So you can access those versions from the console, or programmatically also you can do. Suppose your server is reading the data from S3, by default, if you are not specifying the version and all, by default you will be always reading the latest version of your data. But in case any specific requirement that, okay, I would like to read the older version, yesterday's version, day before yesterday's version, you can even read that programmatically also. In the console I will show you how to see the older version of the data. Okay,
So do I see multiple files on there? Is that how, I mean, when I look at it, do I see multiple files or only single file?
by default you will see single file. I will show you one small button. Once you open, once you enable that, it will display older files as well.
Okay.
Okay, I will show you shortly once we will upload our file. The next is tags. As we discussed yesterday, each and every single resource you will create in AWS, they will give you the option to add the tags if you want. If that's not mandatory, but if there is any requirement from your company side, sometime multiple teams are working and it's a mandatory request from your manager that if you are creating any tag, please add your team name, so that later on we can identify, we can figure out which team is consuming more storage, which team is consuming more compute, which team is adding more to the cost. There can be some high level management level analysis. For that one it can be useful, otherwise technically there is no significance. Moving to the next setting, encryption. That's very important thing. If you are keeping your data as it is without any encryption, that is not good. Because in that case, if someone somehow get access to your data is compromised. But if you are keeping your data in a encrypted manner, even if someone will get access to your data, the data is in a non-human readable format for them. It's a useless for them. So it's very important to encrypt your data. And there are many ways to encrypt. First thing is, either you encrypt by yourself. You will say that, okay, I will take care of encryption and I will upload the encrypted data to the S3 bucket. That you can do. But in that case, you have to take care of encryption part. That can be little bit challenging. I won't say challenging, but you have to put extra efforts for that. On the other side, AWS is anyway providing that. AWS is saying that you only provide your raw data, whatever data you have, you provide that. We will take care of encryption part. So you can see the first option, server side encryption with Amazon S3 managed keys. We will have a separate class for encryption and all. Today's class is not about encryption. Today's class is about S3. But just to give you a brief idea that multiple ways are there for encryption, we will go with the first option. Otherwise, there is a second option you can see, server side encryption with AWS key management service keys. The service name is KMS, Key Management Service. That's a separate service and that's part of our training program. We will be exploring in much more detail in a separate class. Okay, so we'll be going with the first option, that is server side encryption with Amazon S3 managed keys. And shall we look for additional setting? Let me quickly check. No, those are not required. Okay, so we are almost good. So we have talked about almost all the settings, and the only thing we provided is just a name. That's all. So I will click on create. If my name is unique, it will create. Otherwise, we may have to give some different name. Okay, that name is not unique. Bucket name with same name already exists. Okay, we'll add some number. I would say okay, perfect. So the direct bucket has been created, and you can see some details here. So this is my bucket name. This is the region when I have created the bucket. As we discussed yesterday, there are different regions available. You can see here, right? North Virginia, Ohio, North California. So by default, anyone who is creating the trial account, by default, your region will be selected as North Virginia. But if you want to change, I mean, if there is no specific requirement, then keep it North Virginia. That's absolutely fine. If you are working in a real project and if you are looking for something local, if you're in India, if you're in Europe, if you're in Australia, accordingly, you can choose any other region as well. Okay. So I have created a bucket and it was the creation time. Now, if you click on that, you will find that there is no data because we haven't copied any data yet. So just give me a moment. Okay. So you can see that there is no file. Objects, we call it as objects. We don't call it as files because these are like non-modifiable objects are there. So we will upload our file. Let's try that. Click on upload. So it's like a Google Drive. Everyone uses Google Drive, right? So just like you can upload files into Google Drive from your laptop, from your phone, and you can access on other devices as well, exactly same thing. But it's more like a, it's not like a personal data. It's more like project data, text files, CSV files. And ultimate purpose is not storage. Ultimate purpose is to analyze the data, but analysis part will be taken care by your remote servers, and storage part will be completely taken care by S3. So I will click on add files and let's search for some file. I think we have some sample data. So I'm adding some file, sample employee data.csv. You don't have to worry about the content of this file for now. Later on in upcoming classes, when we will process the data, I will show you the content as well. But for now, simply upload the file. And it's not only text file, you can upload anything. So now there should be some upload option. Yeah, it's there. Click on upload.
Is
Okay.
there any size file? I mean, is there a size limit to it?
I think yes, but that's very huge limit. I think that's a 5 GB single file limit, 5 GB, and total size there is no limit. You have terabytes of data, petabytes of data. It's absolutely fine. You can upload. Single file limit, I think it's 5 GB.
Okay.
So we have uploaded the file, and as we were talking about versioning, right? Let's try that. So let me show you the content as well. We will modify the file and then we will upload it again. So Just give me a moment. I will open this file. Sample employee data.csv. Okay, so this is the data. You can see that the first line is header, employee id, name, age, gender, department id, and manager employee id. And you can look at the data. Employee 001, employee name is Neeraj, age 32, gender male, department 1. Employee 007 is the manager's employee id, my manager's employee id. And even manager is ultimately an employee. So you can see line number 7, employee id is employee 007, name is Mahesh, age, and other details are there. Okay, so this is my sample data for now. And before we proceed, there is a question on the chat. Just give me a moment. Let me read that for everyone first. Okay, so there's a question from Manju. To access this file, one should always come to the console. If these files are made public, can they be accessed via some unique URL instead of coming to the console? I want to use the image uploaded in S3 in my website application. Yes, absolutely. You can do that. And that's very good use case. You have bring very good point that if something is public, I don't want to restrict it. Just like website. In today's class, or if not today, then definitely tomorrow's class, I will show you how to host static website on S3. Usually, when you think about website, the very first thing which comes in our mind is server. We need some server, right? And that server will be a web server. But for static website hosting, you don't need a web server because it's not like a interactive, it's like a static page, some static content, some static photos. And most of the small business who are maintaining like catalog, right, for them we don't need any dynamic content. It's not a internet banking that different users will log in and your balance will change, and it's not like that. So static website hosting can be very easily set up with the help of S3. What are the different steps involved, that we will be talking about in much more detail. Okay, so coming back to the data. So what I will do is I will make some changes. Either I can add some data or I can remove something. I would say I would remove, because if you look at last few lines, those are duplicate lines. Ajay, 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 Ajay. Let me delete few lines. I will delete these lines. Okay, and let's save this file. And what we will do is we will upload this file once more time. So let's close this and upload one more time. So if you will upload the same file, I mean file with the same name, it will be considered as versioning. If you're uploading a file with a new name, that will be altogether new file. So since our file name is same and the content has changed, so it will be coming under versioning. So I will click on add files. I will search for the same file again, sample employee data.csv, and open. Okay, click on upload. Okay, so you can see that file is displayed, but only one file is displayed. It's not displaying two versions. How to do that? Where is that? There was a small button. Okay, let me close it first. Okay, you can see that show versions, right? By default, it's disabled. That means most of the time we always want to read the latest content, but there can be scenario you want to read the older data. Simply click on this, and you can see now. Okay, so this one is the latest. Type is CSV. This is unique version ID. You don't have to remember it, but programmatically sometime it may be required. So this is unique version ID. Last modified time is this one, 728. Okay, size is 379. If I look at the older version, the time was 724, just like 4 minutes back. And you can notice that the size was higher. Why? Because earlier there were like 13, 14 rows and I removed few rows. That's why the latest file is quite smaller. Maybe tomorrow I will add 10 more rows. Then the size will increase and I will upload it again. In that case, it will display three files. If you want to access a particular file, suppose you have updated the file on your local, that means the older version is not available on local, right? How to get the local version? You can, this is the older version, right? So you can click here on the checkbox, and then there's a download button. So once you click on that checkbox, your download button will be enabled and you can download that file. Okay. So this is all about how to create a bucket and how to upload the data into the bucket. I will take a pause here. In case you are having any doubt till now, please feel free to ask. In the meantime, I will quickly see what we have done and what is pending. Okay. Storage class is there. So if there is no doubt, we'll talk about storage classes. Okay. Storage class is nothing but different type of storage. Usually by default, we will go with the first option, that is standard. And what is that? Different description is given here. You can see that. So frequently accessed data more than once a month with milliseconds access. There are two main, you can say, criteria which you should consider before choosing the storage class. First thing is how frequently you want to access the data. Will you be accessing it every day? Will you be accessing it multiple times a day? Or you rarely need it once a year? That's one factor. Second factor is whenever you request for the data, do you want it immediately or are you okay to wait for some time? Because that will decide your storage class, and that will also decide the cost. Because suppose your data is stored in archives and you say, okay, I don't need this data, I hardly need once a year, and whenever I will ask for this data, that time you have to provide me within seconds. That would be more costly. On the other side, if you say that keep this data in archive, first of all, I don't need it. In case I need it, I will request, and I'm okay to wait for few minutes, or I'm even okay to wait for few hours. I will request in the morning, and even if you provide me the data in the evening, I'm absolutely fine with that. If that is the case, that will be less chargeable. It all depends on your requirement. Sometimes you are dealing with very critical applications, stock market or gaming or like that, you cannot afford to wait for few minutes or few hours. In that case, you cannot go with that option, you have to pay more for it. But in case the requirement is that okay, there is nothing critical and we are okay to wait for few hours, in that case you can go with those storage classes as well. So we'll talk about that. The first one is standard one. That is, you can say by default. If you are not aware like which storage class I should go with, simply go with the standard one. Next one is intelligent tiering, that we will talk in the end, and I will explain why we will talk in the end. Okay. So I will go to the next one, standard IA. IA is infrequent access. That means you know that data will not be accessed very frequently. You can see that once a month. In that case, you can go with standard IA. The ultimate purpose of choosing this is to reduce the cost. Next is one zone IA. Usually by default, Amazon maintains 3 copies of data at 3 different locations. But sometimes you say that I don't need to maintain 3 copies. Suppose the data can be reproducible. For example, you have some input data and you can execute some job on that and you can produce some output. So basically, unfortunately, if you are losing your output, you can again reproduce, right? So in that case, you would say that input data is critical. Please maintain duplicate copy, because if I will lose the input data, that's not good. But output data, no need to maintain 3 copies. I'm okay with 1 copy. First of all, AWS will make sure that 99.99% you will not be losing that first copy. But just 0.01% chances are there that you may lose the data because you are maintaining only 1 copy. Suppose you are maintaining in Mumbai server and flood hits Mumbai and something happened, your server crashed because of rains or something, right? So in that case, how would I do that? Because only 1 copy was maintained. In order to save the cost, I explicitly requested AWS to maintain only 1 copy, not 3 copies. So AWS did that. But now, unfortunately, I lost my data. In that case, you have your job, you have your input data, run the job again and produce the output. You can do that. In that case, you can go with one zone IA. You can see that recreatable, the data which can be recreated, infrequently accessed data once a month, storage in a single availability zone with millisecond access. What are availability zones? We'll talk about in upcoming classes. But as the name indicates, where exactly your data is available, we call it as availability zone. So by default, there are three availability zones where the data is maintained. But if you explicitly say that I want to go with one zone IA, you can do that. That will be less chargeable. The next class is Glacier Instant Retrieval. Glacier is basically for your archive data. Long lived archive data accessed once a quarter with instant retrieval. As I was giving the example, that although it's my archive data, you rarely use it, but whenever I will request, I want it immediately. That's why we call it as instant retrieval. And moving to the next one. So Glacier Instant Retrieval we talked about. After that, Glacier Flexible Retrieval. You can wait for few hours. You can see that. Long lived archive data accessed once a year with retrieval of minutes to hours. And the last one, Glacier Deep Archive. That is long lived archive data accessed less than 1 year and with retrieval of hours. Okay, there are many storage classes, right? You may be thinking, how do we remember that? You don't need to remember it, first of all. On very high level, you should know that there are different storage classes available, so that in case your client says, suppose your client say, okay, I am paying a lot on S3, can you help me to reduce the cost? Then you should think immediately, okay, there are few storage classes, let me go through it. You may not remember that time immediately, but at least you know that there are different storage classes available, and as per our need, we can choose. There are two requirements. Either you want to save the cost, so you can go with other classes, or there can be option that, okay, there is no constraint on the budget, please use the best storage class, I want the performance. That can also be the case. So you should be knowing about all the options. The last is reduce redundancy. If you read that, that's not very useful. Non-critical frequently accessed data with millisecond access not recommended, as S3 standard is more cost effective. Although they are providing it, but at the same time, AWS itself is saying that it's not recommended to use this. It's absolutely, you can say, skip that. Now, I skipped one storage class, intelligent tiering, right? If you note at the this column designed for, there are different patterns: infrequently used, frequently used, recreatable, long archive. You may be thinking that my project is not yet started. I really don't know how frequently my data will be accessed, or is it a more frequently accessed data, or is it archive data? If you are not aware about anything, you can go with intelligent tiering as well. Intelligent tiering is capable of automatically checking your access pattern and changing your class accordingly. You can do that. And I would say I'm working on AWS from last almost 7 years. And to be frank, we didn't use any class apart from standard. We go with that only. Only in some specific cases, if some client says, okay, I want to reduce the cost, or I want to do this, then simply you can change the storage class. Okay. So any doubt till now, you can ask me. Okay, there's a question from Manju. She's saying, I want a custom storage class. Is that possible? No, Manju, that's not possible, because AWS is anyway providing a lot of around 10 to 12 storage classes for different type of scenarios. You have to choose from there. I understood your question. You are thinking from yesterday's point of view, like we were creating our own customized policy. So that thing is not possible with storage class. We have to choose from the available existing storage classes. I hope that answered your question. Okay, there's another question from Manju. She's asking, like, do they provide auto purge option in S3? For every file created, I want to maintain it only for 30 days and delete it after 30 days based on my requirement. Yes, they do provide. Let's check it out. I will try to show you if I can find management. Yeah, these are the thing. If you go to the management section, the very first thing is lifecycle rule. With the help of lifecycle rule, you can define many things. This is whatever you are saying is very you can say common scenario, that after 30 days I want to delete that. That means new file will keep on coming to my bucket, and I want old file keep on deleting automatically. That's possible. Another scenario is you may not be interested to delete the file, but you may be interested to move the file from standard class. Let's move it to archive, because that will be less chargeable, that will be less costly. That's also possible. Let's try that. So life cycle rule name, anything is fine. I would say purge old files. Choose a rule scope. Limit the scope to this rule using one or more filters or all the objects. It's up to you. And sometimes you may say that, okay, any file which is ending with .csv, only to those files this rule should be applicable. Suppose deleting the file, any other file should not be deleted. That's also possible. If you want to apply this rule to all the objects, you can do that also. Okay. And if you do this can be little risky, because there can be some important data that will also be deleted. That's why they are simply displaying a warning. If you want to rule to apply to specific object, you must use a filter, and if you are okay with all objects, you can acknowledge this. That's all that you can do. So we'll do that, and let's see what we want. So transition current version of the objects between storage classes. I was giving an example. You can move from standard to like other class. And if you want to delete, you can see this one also. Permanently delete version of the objects. You can do that also. So let's try with transition. Okay. So what is that? For a lifecycle transition action, each request corresponding to an object transition. For detail on lifecycle transition pricing, see request pricing info and all that stuff. Okay, this may not be under our free limit, so we'll not do that, but at least you understood how to do that, right? And what is that? By default, object less than 128 KB will not transition across any storage class. Okay, that's fine. Anyway, our file size is bigger than 128 KB, and you can see that what type of different classes are available. You can see whatever we talked about. Standard IA, intelligent tiering, one zone IA, glacier, instant retrieval. Whatever we talked about on the slide, all are available here. Okay.
So Neeraj, this is where we define classes for our bucket.
No, this is not. This is for transition. If you want to define the classes for our bucket, it was under the
Mhm.
additional setting. So let me go to
Okay.
the. mm, okay, I will show you that. Okay. So this is life cycle role for transition. If you want to simply delete that, you can go with this one of this option. Okay, I will remove this, and you can go with this. Days after object becomes non-current, so maybe I would say 30 days. Okay. Yeah, that's all. So you can click on create rule. So this rule will be created, and after 30 days of time the file will be automatically deleted, but it's not recommended to apply it for all the objects. You should always go with some filter type. You can put some prefix or suffix. I would say .csv. Okay, you can see that. So any file with ending with .csv will be deleted after 30 days. If you want to test it, you can make it like 2 days. You can test like that. Make it 2 days. Okay, we'll check after 2 days whether this file will be automatically deleted or not. Let's create this rule. Okay, rule has been created. And coming to another question about storage class. So this is my bucket. Um, Properties. Let's see. Versioning, text, encryption, intelligent steering, event notification. Okay. Maybe I think once we create the bucket, I think after that we cannot change, because when I was creating the bucket, I remember there was an option. Let me show you. We'll try to create a new bucket. Create bucket, and let's scroll down. Additional setting, right? Additional setting. There was some option. It versioning. ownership, public access, versioning, default encryption. Let's check it out. How to change storage class. By default, the bucket is standard. While publishing each object, we can change the storage. Okay, at each object. Okay, I noticed while uploading. Okay, I will show you. I was thinking that today only I have seen that option. So if you upload any object, that time it will give you the option. So click on upload, add files. Let's add a different file this time. Sample department data.csv. Open, and it's here. I noticed this one. You can see that. So by default, storage class, I mean standard class is chosen, but if you want to change it for this file, I want to make it like one zone IA. I want to maintain this file only in one zone, not three zones. I can do that. And you can see this one, availability zone. So standard is equal to greater than 3 because there are different data centers across the globe, and at least 3 availability zones are there. But somewhere in few of the US regions, they are even maintaining 4 or 5 availability zones as well. That's why it's mentioned as greater than equal to 3. So I'm going with one zone. Availability zone will be 1. Only one copy will be maintained. That's all. And click on upload. So my earlier file uploaded, that was like standard class, and this one is my like one zone. So we can close this, and you can see this. You can see the last column. Sample department is storage class is one zone, and employee is standard class. So at the time of uploading the, basically it's not a bucket level setting, it's more a object level setting.
Got
In
it.
the same bucket,
Yeah.
different objects can have different storage class. Okay, any question from anyone? So we are good for the day. There are more advanced topics for S3. You can see there are many more tabs, right? Properties, permissions, management, access point. All these things we will be exploring in tomorrow's class. And one of the interesting topic would be the last one, static website hosting. As Manju was asking, like if I want to just host some static content, some images, and I want to make it publicly available, we can do that quickly within 5 minutes. We don't need any web server, and that will work like a website. I will show you that tomorrow. So for that one, we would need some HTML code that's handy with me. I will use that code during the class, and I will upload that code to the course as well. That means you can download it and you can use it for your practice. Okay, so that's all for today. If there is no doubt, we can close the call.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Neeraj. Please
Okay,
add those sample data out there so
sure,
that
sure.
we can
We'll
use
do
it
that.
for.
Whatever I will show or demonstrate every day, you will find everything on the course. I will upload shortly.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.